8 hours of sleep every night is completely wrong. Has anyone ever actually told you that? 10,000 steps a day was invented by a marketing team. No science behind it, not a single study. Running destroys your knees, your doctor probably said this. The peer-reviewed research says the opposite. Building as much muscle as possible in the gym is actually going against your own biology. Sitting is the new smoking. That phrase is misleading. Sitting is not the problem. Unbroken sitting is. Exercise is the best tool for losing weight. The math on this barely holds up at the doses most people use. Slowing down as you age is natural and inevitable. This may be the most damaging belief on the list. 7 things almost everyone believes about health and the body. All 7 contradict the actual research. And none of this is hidden. It has been in the scientific literature for years. It just never quite made it into the conversations most people are having about their health. So where did all of it come from? Most of it traces back to one fundamental problem. 90% of all medical research comes from the US, Canada, Europe, and Australia. A wealthy, sedentary slice of how humans have lived across 2 million years of evolutionary history. When researchers went elsewhere, Kenya, Mexico, the Amazon, the picture shifted completely. People walking 10 miles a day, no gym, no tracker, no concept of training as a separate activity. Do not have the chronic diseases we have quietly accepted as a normal part of getting older. Heart disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, high blood pressure, common yes, inevitable. The research says no. 74% of diseases filling hospital beds right now are classified as preventable. Read that twice. And the tool that prevents most of them is not a drug, not a procedure, not a new technology. You already have access to it. Most people just have the wrong instructions for how to use it. We are going through all 7 today directly, with the actual science behind each one. No scare tactics, no exaggeration, just what the research shows when you go looking for it. By the end, you will want to change a few things, and genuinely a few is enough. Let's start with sleep, specifically, the 8-hour rule and where it actually came from. Because it did not come from biology, it did not come from a clinical study. It came from the Industrial Revolution. Factory owners needed a predictable daily structure for shift workers. 8 hours of work, 8 of sleep, 8 of personal time. A scheduling framework turned into medical advice. That advice became dogma, and the dogma went untested for decades until researchers finally decided to check it. They did it the most direct way possible, measuring sleep in populations with no electricity, no phones, no artificial light. What they found contradicted almost everything we have been told about how much sleep humans actually need. Populations in Africa, South America, and parts of Asia completely without the things we blame for bad sleep. Every group they studied came back with the same number, 6 to 7 hours a night, not 8. And these were not unhealthy people, some of the most comprehensively healthy populations ever measured. Then they ran the health outcome data, and this is where things got interesting. Sleep and health outcomes follow a U-shaped curve. Too little is clearly bad. But too much sleep also correlates with worse outcomes. The U has 2 dangerous ends. The bottom of that U, the healthiest zone, sits consistently around 7 hours for most adults. People sleeping 7 hours out perform people sleeping 8 on nearly every major health marker studied, which means a lot of people anxious about not hitting 8 hours are actually hitting the optimal number. That anxiety is probably costing them sleep, a genuinely cruel irony built into the myth itself. There is one more layer to this. Sleep needs shift with age, and that shift is completely normal. Teenagers biologically need more. Older adults biologically need less. One universal number never made biological sense. The factory needed a standard sleep schedule. Your body has its own calibration, and it is not 8. The practical takeaway here is actually freeing stop chasing 8. 7 is the real target. Dark room, consistent schedule. Cooler temperature quality factors matter more than an extra hour in bed. Now, sitting. You have definitely seen the phrase, sitting is the new smoking. It is on posters in doctors' offices, in health magazines, in corporate wellness emails. And it is based on a real concern sedentary behavior genuinely correlates with worse health outcomes. But the phrase is imprecise, and that imprecision changes what the fix actually looks like. Because when researchers went and measured sitting behavior in hunter-gatherers, they found something unexpected. Hunter-gatherers sit roughly the same number of hours per day as people in modern Western countries. The hours are similar, the health outcomes are not, which means the hours alone are not the variable. The variable is something subtler, and once you understand it, the fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Western adults average about 40 continuous minutes of sitting before shifting or standing, often much longer. Hunter-gatherers naturally move, shift position, or get up every 10 to 15 minutes without thinking about it. That interruption is doing something specific. Each time you stand after extended sitting, a biological switch flips. Blood sugar drops, metabolic repair genes activate, cellular processes restart from 60 seconds of standing up. 2 people, Identical total sitting hours. One gets up every 15 minutes, one sits unbroken for hours. Across a year, their health markers diverge in measurable, significant ways, same hours, very different outcomes. The fix is the lowest tech suggestion in this entire video. Set a timer for every 15 minutes. Stand when it goes off, walk somewhere. 60 seconds. That is enough to reset the mechanism. Not a workout, not a mile walked. Just the interruption itself is what matters. Sitting is not the enemy. Long, unbroken, continuous sitting without any relief is the problem. Now, myth 3, 10,000 steps. This one has a very specific and genuinely strange origin story. June 1964, Tokyo. A Japanese company has invented a consumer pedometer and needs a name that will sell. Someone suggests 10,000 steps in Japanese culture. It is considered an auspicious, lucky number. No clinical trial, no exercise researcher in the room, a marketing decision, and it never went away. 60 years later, 10,000 steps is the default target on every fitness tracker sold on the planet. Here is the strange thing when you run the actual research. The number is not completely off. Hunter-gatherers walk between 10 and 18,000 steps per day, depending on season and terrain. So it landed roughly in the right zone, purely by accident. But the research tells a more specific story and a more useful one than the round number does. When you plot steps per day against health outcomes, the curve rises steeply from zero. Going from sedentary to any consistent movement, even 2,000 or 3,000 extra steps makes a real difference. But the curve flattens well before 10,000. Most research consistently puts the point of diminishing returns around 7,000 steps per day. Beyond 7,000, you continue gaining benefit, but the slope is nearly flat. 7,000 steps is roughly 3.5 miles, 45 to 60 minutes of walking. A more realistic target for most people, and one the research actually backs. 10,000 is not harmful. You're not failing at 7,000. The research says you are doing well. The bigger point, going from zero to any consistent movement, delivers more benefit than any specific number. The steepest part of the health curve is at the very beginning, from nothing to something. That is where the most dramatic gains happen, not at the top of the curve at the base. All right, myth 4. This is the one that may matter most depending on where you are in life. The belief that becoming less active as you age is simply what aging looks like, normal, expected. This belief gives people permission to stop, and the consequences of that permission compound over decades. The evolutionary biology here almost never comes up in these conversations, and it completely reframes the picture. Humans are one of the only species on Earth that lives significantly past reproductive age. Killer whales do it, a small handful of others. Among mammals, broadly extraordinarily rare. Evolutionary researchers ask the obvious question, why did humans evolve to keep living decades past reproduction? The data points to one answer, because those later years were never designed to be years of rest. In every hunter-gatherer society ever studied, older adults are working every single day. Gathering food, caring for grandchildren, maintaining the infrastructure the entire group depends on. That daily physical work is doing something critical inside the body, activating biological repair systems. Those systems keep DNA from accumulating mutations, maintain mitochondrial function in every cell. They clear the cellular waste from the brain that, when it accumulates, leads directly to Alzheimer's and dementia. Physical activity is not just good for the heart. It is one of the primary defenses we have for the brain. When you stop, those repair systems do not slow gradually, they largely switch off. Inactivity accelerates aging. That is not metaphorical. It is mechanical. Movement is what activates the repair signal. There is a Harvard study worth knowing, 25 to 30 years, thousands of alumni, full health tracking. Among people who exercised regularly in their 20s and 30s, death rates about 20% lower. Already significant. But here is what made the researchers pay closer attention to the older age groups. When those same people reached their 60s and 70s, the gap had not held at 20%. It had grown. Alumni who kept exercising had 50% lower death rates than those who had stopped. Not 20, 50. The benefit of activity did not shrink with age. It roughly doubled. The older you get, the wider the gap between consistently active and consistently inactive people becomes. Exercise does not matter less as you age. It matters significantly, measurably more. Now, the specific mechanism that explains what we see, sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is the gradual loss of muscle mass that accelerates after 40. 3 to 5% of muscle mass per decade. On average, compounding silently over years. What it leads to is frailty, a clinical state, not just a description of how someone feels. Frailty dramatically increases fall risk. Hip fractures are a leading cause of death over 70. Often not because of the fracture itself, because of what sudden forced immobility does to an aging body. The good news here is genuinely clear sarcopenia is largely preventable, not with medication. With resistance training, twice per week, moderate effort, not a serious gym program. Squats, push-ups, resistance bands. 2 sessions a week, done consistently over time. The goal is not building bigger muscles. It is holding on to the muscle you already have. Preserved muscle means maintained function. Function means independence at 75, and that is not abstract. That is whether you can drive yourself to an appointment, cook your own meals, get up off the floor. Physical capability is what keeps you living on your own terms, and it is largely a training variable. Now, retirement. This is probably the piece that is hardest to hear, depending on where you are. Complete withdrawal from structured daily activity at 65 is historically almost unprecedented in human life. Hunter-gatherers do not retire. Subsistence farmers do not retire. The concept barely existed before industrialization. When people retire and dramatically reduce their movement, the body responds exactly the way research predicts. Every system maintained by daily physical activity muscles. Brain, immune function begins declining faster. This is not about work being inherently meaningful or necessary. It is about what the movement of work was doing. The daily sustained physical effort, the problem solving, the social engagement, all of it has biological effects. Replace it, intentionally dance, garden, walk every morning, join something, coach something. The specific form almost does not matter. What matters is that the body keeps receiving the movement signal, the signal that the machine still has a job, that it still needs to maintain itself for the work ahead. All right, myth 5. This one will vindicate a lot of people who were told to stop something they loved. Running destroys your knees, said confidently by doctors, therapists, and people who have never run. It is one of the most persistently repeated myths in exercise medicine, and the research is unusually clear. Running does not cause knee arthritis in joints without existing damage. It may actually be mildly protective. Cartilage benefits from being regularly used, like every other tissue in the body. Physical activity stimulates cartilage repair mechanisms. Inactivity allows them to stall. Where does running-related knee pain actually come from? Almost universally technique, not mileage. For virtually our entire evolutionary history, humans ran barefoot. Barefoot runners almost universally land on the midfoot or forefoot, not the heel. Modern running shoes with thick cushioned heels actively encourage heel-first landing, and that creates a problem. A heel strike sends a sharp collision force up the leg directly to the knee every single step. Shift to midfoot or forefoot landing, and that collision largely disappears the leg functions as a spring. Published in Nature, well replicated across multiple research groups, this is mainstream biomechanics, not fringe theory. The most important correction is eliminating overstriding, not throwing your foot far ahead of your body. When your ankle lands below your knee, impact is absorbed naturally and knee stress drops. A stride rate around 175 steps per minute naturally shortens stride and improves mechanics. Warning shifting form moves load from the knee to the Achilles and calf, transitions slowly over weeks. The conclusion stands: technique determines joint health outcomes over time, not running itself. For most people, the bigger risk is not running too much. It is not running at all. Myth 6. This one is behind more abandoned gym memberships than anything else we will cover. Exercise burns fat, one of the most widely held beliefs in health. And the math is genuinely awkward. A standard fast food cheeseburger, 800 to 900 calories. A normal lunch for a lot of people. To burn those calories through exercise alone, you need to run roughly 9 miles. 9 miles. Then you come home hungry, the body tracked exactly what happened and wants it back. This is not a design flaw, it is the body defending a caloric set point, aggressively and intelligently. When you burn extra calories, hunger hormones increase, food becomes more appealing, portions drift upward. At 150 minutes of moderate exercise per week, the standard guideline, you burn about 50 extra calories a day. Less than a glass of orange juice. The numbers are genuinely that limited when fast weight loss is the metric. Higher doses, 300 plus minutes per week, show real effects on body weight over time. But not dramatic, not the first month results people walk into a gym expecting to see. So what is exercise actually good for? Here is where the framing shifts completely. Exercise is remarkably effective at something most people underestimate, keeping weight off after you have lost it. A Boston police study shows this cleanly overweight officers put on a supervised diet, split into 2 groups. One group dieted only, one dieted and exercised. Both lost weight, the exercise group a bit more. Then the diet ended, and both groups returned to eating normally without any restrictions. Diet-only group weight came back, mostly. The exercising group weight stayed off. Not because of calories burned, because exercise changes behavior, metabolism, and hormonal response over time. It changes what you want to eat, how you handle stress, how well you sleep. It compounds. People who exercise also tend to make better food choices on the same day consistently across research. Not perfectly, not always, but reliably enough to show up in large population studies. The useful reframe: stop using exercise to earn food or to undo last night. Use it to maintain what better eating has already built. That is where the lasting value actually is. Diet gets the weight off. Exercise keeps it off. They work together, not as alternatives. Myth 7. The idea that maximum muscle equals maximum health, and that the ancestral human ideal was built. Social media and the ancestral living movement have pushed this image hard. It makes intuitive sense. Here is what data on actual hunter-gatherers shows. It does not match that image at all. People living hunter-gatherer lifestyles are lean and functionally strong, not built like bodybuilders, not even close. Muscle is metabolically expensive at rest. Muscle tissue burns roughly 20% of total daily calories. For a subsistence hunter with unpredictable food access, extra muscle is a genuine liability. It costs calories you may not have. It can slow endurance over the distances hunting actually requires. Natural selection does not optimize for appearance. It optimizes for survival and reproduction, nothing more. Use it or lose it, your body builds and maintains exactly the muscle the current demands require. The actual goal is not more muscle. It is maintained functional muscle preserved as you age. Functional means getting up from a chair at 75 without effort, carrying things, climbing stairs. 2 resistance sessions per week is what the research consistently supports for maintaining that over time. No gym required. Resistance bands, body weight, dumbbells equipment is secondary. Consistency is everything. Now, the piece that connects almost everything we have covered and almost never gets discussed publicly. The link between physical activity and cancer risk. One of the best documented findings in exercise science. Almost nobody talks about it, and almost nobody starts moving because of it. To understand the connection, what cancer is at the cellular level matters. Cancer is runaway cell division cells competing for energy, multiplying without normal biological controls. What feeds that process? Excess energy created by too much food and too little movement. When blood sugar spikes from high glycemic foods, insulin rises sharply to manage it. Insulin's job is energy storage. It signals cells to absorb glucose, grow, divide. Chronically elevated insulin creates conditions that actively favor cancer development. The research is not subtle on this. There's also a direct hormonal connection between body fat and cancer. Most people have never heard it. Fat tissue is hormonally active. It produces estrogen and influences testosterone levels in men. More body fat, more circulating estrogen, higher lifetime breast cancer risk. Women who exercise 150 minutes per week have roughly 30 to 50% lower breast cancer risk. 30 to 50%. That should be on billboards. It is almost never mentioned in a doctor's visit. Physical activity lowers insulin, normalizes hormones, creates a metabolic environment hostile to cancer growth. The same hormonal mechanism raises prostate cancer risk in men who are sedentary and carrying excess weight. Now, inflammation? The second mechanism, with the broadest reach across chronic disease. Chronic low-grade inflammation. The slow burn is a persistent immune activation that never fully quiets. It underlies heart disease, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, and multiple cancers often simultaneously. Excess body fat drives it. Overfilled fat cells trigger an immune response that does not turn off. Here's what almost nobody knows. Your muscles are an anti-inflammatory organ. When you exercise, working muscles release a molecule called interleukin-6 IL-6. At high levels, generated by sustained movement. IL-6 actively suppresses systemic inflammation. Muscles make up about 30% of body mass when they work. The anti-inflammatory signal is enormous. Regularly active people have significantly lower systemic inflammation, even when they carry extra weight. Exercise is partially compensating for the inflammatory effects of excess fat. That is meaningful. The evolutionary reason this matters: humans never evolved a backup system for managing inflammation. For 2 million years, sustained daily movement was automatic. Inflammation was regulated by that activity. We are the first populations in human history to live without that built-in regulation. Our chronic disease patterns directly reflect that mismatch measurably and consistently. Exercise is not optional maintenance. It is the mechanism the body was built to run on. So how do you actually start, and how do you stay consistent past the first 2 weeks? Because willpower alone is not a strategy. The research has a more specific and honest answer. Humans evolved to be physically active for only 2 reasons: necessity and genuine reward. Necessity handled everything for 2 million years. You moved because survival required it. That is gone now. The world is engineered for convenience, and our biology does not automatically override that pull. Taking the escalator, sitting down, choosing the easier path, that is not weakness, that is evolution. Which means the sustainable approach is not more willpower. It is making movement genuinely rewarding. The single most consistent predictor of long-term exercise adherence across study after study is social connection. People who move with other people move more consistently, more often, and for longer over time. A walking partner means you show up on days you would not because you do not want to let them down. A class Puts you in a room of people doing the same thing. That shared context is genuinely motivating. Every human culture in history has had communal physical activity. Dancing, games, collective work. Social movement is the form exercise took for virtually our entire existence as a species. It is the default. Pickleball, water aerobics, a walking group. A dance class, the specific activity is almost secondary. What matters is that other people are there and you would feel mildly bad for not showing up. Accountability works when it is immediate and personal, not a vague long-term goal, but a person expecting you. There's also something worth knowing about dopamine and why starting exercise is so genuinely hard. A fit person finishing a run gets a real dopamine hit, a neurological reward. That is what keeps them going. That reward is what makes exercise self-reinforcing over time. The brain says, do that again, in people who are sedentary. That response takes months, sometimes longer, to fully develop. You do all the work. The brain delivers almost none of the reward. That is physiology, not failure. The reward system has to be rebuilt from a state of disuse. It takes time, which is why starting small genuinely matters, not for the calories, but for what you are rebuilding. Walk 10 minutes today, do it again tomorrow. Take the stairs when you would normally not. The system slowly comes back online, and when it does, the whole dynamic changes. Exercise stops being something you push yourself toward and becomes something you miss when you skip it. That transition takes time, but it happens consistently across different people and starting points. And social connection is usually what carries people through the early phase, before the biology catches up. Find one thing that involves another person and some form of movement. One thing, that is the starting place. The specifics almost do not matter. The consistency and the company are what the research consistently points to. Let's pull everything together into something you can actually use, starting today. First, the sitting issue, lowest barrier to entry of anything we covered. Set a 15-minute timer while seated. Stand up when it goes off, move for 60 seconds. Not a walk, not a workout. The interruption itself is what the biology needs. Second, 7,000 steps per day. That is the real target backed by research, not 10,000. Work from where you currently are. Going from 2,000 to 4,000 is the meaningful win. Third, resistance training. Twice a week, moderate, consistent, not intense, not heavy. Squat, push-up, row 3 movements, twice per week. That is the minimum effective dose the research supports. Fourth, sleep, 7 hours. Stop stressing about 8, dark room, cool temperature, consistent schedule. Fifth, reduce high glycemic foods where you can. You do not need to eliminate sugar, reduce it. The downstream effects on inflammation, insulin, and cancer risk are outsized relative to the effort. Sixth one, social physical activity, 1, with at least one other person involved. The form does not matter. The consistency and the social component are what make it last. You do not need to do all of this at once. Doing one thing consistently is not failure. It is exactly how durable change works, one habit at a time, compounding over months and years. The biggest health gains happen at the beginning of the curve, from zero to any consistent movement. That transition from nothing to something is where the data is most dramatic. Start there. 7 myths, most built on industrial-era assumptions, accidental marketing, or limited research populations. The actual science is more nuanced and, in most ways, far more manageable than the myths suggest. Stay curious, stay moving. We will see you in the next one.